Waitress slept in playground. Every night, when he finds out, he breaks down in tears. The bell above the door chimed softly as Henry pushed it open, letting in a breath of crisp morning air. The familiar scent of coffee and bacon wrapped around him like an old friend. At 67, his steps weren't as steady as they used to be, but this morning ritual gave him something to look forward to each day. "Morning, Henry," called out Joe, the cook from behind the counter. Henry raised his hand in a quiet greeting, his weathered face creasing into a slight smile. The diner hadn't changed much in the 15 years he'd been coming here. Same checked tablecloths, same worn leather booths, same coffee-stained menus. He made his way to his usual spot by the window, where the morning sun warmed the tabletop and cast long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. His joints creaked as he settled into the familiar booth, reminding him of all the years that had passed since his military days. The diner was starting to fill with its regular morning crowd. There was Tom, the retired mailman, hunched over his crossword puzzle. Martha and her sister Eleanor shared their usual booth in the corner, heads bent close together in quiet conversation. The routine of it all gave Henry comfort, even if he rarely joined in the chatter. "Black coffee and toast?" Lily appeared at his table, order pad in hand, though she hardly needed to write it down. She'd been serving him the same breakfast for the past year. "Yes, please," Henry replied, his voice gruff but gentle. He'd always been a man of few words, but something about Lily's presence made him want to say more. Maybe it was the way she treated everyone like family, even the grumpiest customers. While he waited for his order, Henry watched the street outside coming to life. A young mother pushed a stroller past the window, and a group of school kids trudged by with their backpacks. The morning sun caught the edges of buildings, painting them gold. The coffee came quickly, steam rising from the thick white mug. Henry wrapped his hands around it, letting the warmth seep into his fingers. The arthritis wasn't as bad in the summer, but the morning chill still found its way into his bones. As he stirred his coffee, Henry's attention drifted to Lily, moving between tables. Something was off about her today. Her usual bounce was missing from her step, and dark circles shadowed her eyes, visible even under her makeup. Her smile, usually bright enough to light up the whole diner, seemed forced. She nearly dropped a plate while serving the couple in the booth across from him, catching it at the last second. "Sorry about that," she murmured, her cheeks flushing pink. Henry noticed her hands trembling slightly as she set down the plates. When she brought his toast, Henry caught a closer look at her face. Her skin was pale, and her eyes had that glazed look of someone who hadn't slept properly in days. She moved like someone carrying a heavy weight on her shoulders, though she tried to hide it behind her professional demeanor. Henry stirred his coffee thoughtfully, watching as Lily went about her duties. Something wasn't right with the young waitress, but he kept his concerns to himself for now. Years in the military had taught him to observe before acting, and right now, all he could do was watch and wonder what could be troubling someone who usually brought so much light to this small corner of the world. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today? Now back to the story. Henry pulled out his worn leather wallet, counting out the exact change as Lily approached with his check. Her uniform was pressed and clean, but there were subtle signs of wear around the edges that he hadn't noticed before. Her shoes, though polished, had visible scuff marks, and the soles looked worn thin. "Here you go," Lily said, placing the check on the table with that same bright smile she always wore. But up close, Henry could see the dark circles under her eyes, carefully hidden beneath a thin layer of makeup. "Thank you, Lily." Henry cleared his throat, his voice gravelly from years of morning coffees in this same booth. "How are you doing today? You seem a bit tired." Lily's smile flickered for just a moment before returning full force. "Oh, I'm fine, Mr. Michaels. Just the usual morning rush. You know how it gets." She tucked a loose strand of honey blonde hair behind her ear, her hands fidgeting with her pen and notepad. "You sure about that?" Henry asked gently, his weathered face creasing with concern. "Sometimes it helps to talk things through." "Really, everything's okay." Lily shifted her weight from one foot to the other, wincing slightly. "Just had a long week, that's all. Nothing to worry about." Henry noticed how she avoided meeting his eyes, focusing instead on straightening the sugar packets in their container. Her fingers trembled slightly as she arranged them, a detail that might have gone unnoticed by most customers. "Well, if you ever need someone to listen." Henry left the offer hanging in the air between them, careful not to push too hard. "That's very kind of you." Lily's voice softened, and for a brief moment her cheerful facade cracked, revealing something vulnerable underneath. But just as quickly, she pulled herself together. "I should get back to my other tables. Thanks for coming in today, Mr. Michaels." As she turned away, Henry couldn't help but notice the slight limp in her step, the way she favored her right foot. Her shoulders were hunched forward just a bit, as if carrying an invisible weight. Each step seemed measured and careful, like someone trying to conserve energy for a long day ahead. Henry sat back in his booth, wrapping his calloused hands around his coffee cup. The warmth seeped into his fingers as he watched Lily move between tables, greeting other customers with that same unwavering smile. But now that he'd seen beneath it, he couldn't unsee the signs of exhaustion in her movements. The coffee in his cup had grown cold, but Henry barely noticed. His mind was too busy trying to piece together the puzzle of the young waitress who worked so hard to appear fine when clearly something was wrong. Years of military service had taught him to notice details, to read between the lines, and everything about Lily's behavior set off quiet alarms in his mind. He lifted the cup to his lips, taking a final sip of the cold coffee, his eyes following Lily as she disappeared into the kitchen. There was more to her story. He was certain of that now. But he also knew from experience that some people needed time before they could open up, and pushing too hard too fast would only make them retreat further. The neon sign of the diner flickered off, casting the parking lot into darkness. Henry stood outside, his weathered hands tucked into the pockets of his old brown jacket. The night air was cool, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. He watched as Lily locked up, her hands fumbling slightly with the keys. "Let me walk you to your car," Henry said, his gruff voice cutting through the evening silence. The words surprised even him. He usually kept to himself. Lily looked up, startled. Her blonde hair was coming loose from its ponytail, and dark circles showed beneath her eyes despite her makeup. "Oh, Mr. Michaels, you don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to," he replied, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "But it's dark, and—" He trailed off, not sure how to express his concern without seeming intrusive. Lily hesitated, her fingers playing with the strap of her worn purse. Something flickered across her face. Relief, maybe, before she nodded. "Thank you. That's really kind of you." They walked side by side down the narrow alley behind the diner. Their footsteps echoed off the brick walls, and the yellow glow of the street lamps cast long shadows. Henry noticed how Lily walked. Each step seemed heavy, like she was carrying an invisible weight. "Long day?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "Every day's a long day," Lily answered with a small laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. She stumbled slightly over an uneven patch of pavement, and Henry instinctively reached out to steady her. "Careful there," he said softly. "Thanks." Lily wrapped her arms around herself, though the night wasn't particularly cold. "You know, Mr. Michaels, you're probably the first person who's noticed." "Noticed what?" Henry asked when she didn't continue. Lily shook her head. Nothing. Never mind. She forced another smile, but Henry could see it trembling at the edges. They passed a dumpster, and Henry caught sight of Lily's uniform. It was clean but worn, like it had been washed too many times. Her shoes were scuffed and starting to split at the seams, little details he'd never noticed before in the bright lights of the diner. "You know," Henry said carefully, "if you ever need to talk." "I'm fine, really," Lily interrupted quickly. "Everyone has their tough times, right?" They reached the end of the alley, where it opened onto the street. The parking lot stretched before them, mostly empty now except for a few cars. Lily turned to Henry, and for a moment, her carefully maintained facade cracked. The smile she gave him was genuine, but held a sadness that made his heart ache. "Thank you for walking with me, Mr. Michaels. You didn't have to." "Henry," he corrected gently. "Call me Henry." Lily nodded, hugging herself tighter. "Thank you, Henry." She started walking toward her car, her steps slow and weary. Each footfall seemed to take effort, like she was walking through deep water. Henry stood watching her, feeling something heavy settle in his chest. There was more to Lily's story than just being tired from a long shift at the diner. Much more. He could feel it in his bones, the same way he used to sense trouble coming during his time in the service. As Lily's figure grew smaller in the darkness, that heaviness in Henry's chest grew stronger. Something wasn't right, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the young waitress's cheerful facade was hiding a much darker reality. The morning sun had barely risen when Henry's old Buick cruised down Cedar Street. His arthritis was acting up, making his fingers stiff on the steering wheel, but he needed groceries. The street was quiet, peaceful even, with only a few early birds heading to work. As he approached the small park near the diner, something caught his eye. At first it was just a shape, dark against the fading glow of the streetlight. Henry squinted, slowing his car. The shape became clearer. Someone was sleeping on one of the swings. His heart skipped a beat. He recognized that uniform. The same one from the diner. The same one Lily had been wearing yesterday. Henry pulled over to the curb, his hands trembling slightly as he put the car in park. The engine ticked as it cooled, the only sound in the early morning stillness. From here, he could see her clearly. Lily was curled up awkwardly on the swing seat, her head resting against one of the chains. A thin blanket was wrapped around her shoulders, offering little protection against the morning chill. Her face, usually bright with that cheerful smile, looked different in sleep. Vulnerable. Tired. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her clothes were wrinkled from spending the night in such an uncomfortable position. Henry's throat felt tight. The pieces started falling into place. Her exhaustion, the hesitation when he'd offered to walk her to her car, the way she always looked a little disheveled in the mornings, despite trying to stay neat and professional. A jogger passed by, not even glancing at the sleeping figure in the playground. How many people had walked past, Henry wondered, without realizing what they were seeing? How many mornings had Lily woken up here, straightened her uniform, and walked to work as if everything was normal? The weight of this discovery pressed against his chest. This young woman, who always had a kind word for everyone, who remembered how he liked his coffee and would slip him an extra piece of toast when he looked down, had been sleeping in a playground. All this time, while he'd been comfortable in his bed, she'd been out here in the cold. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning white. The morning air felt heavier somehow, charged with the gravity of what he'd witnessed. He thought about his own home, modest but warm, and the empty spare room he never used. A car horn blared in the distance, making him jump. Lily stirred slightly but didn't wake. Henry watched as she pulled the thin blanket closer, seeking warmth in her sleep. He couldn't just sit there watching her. It felt wrong, invasive somehow. With hands that shook slightly, he turned the key in the ignition. The Buick's engine rumbled to life, and Henry pulled away from the curb, his mind racing. The grocery store forgotten, he headed home, his thoughts a jumble of emotions. The image of Lily sleeping on that swing stayed with him, like a photograph burned into his memory. His eyes stung, and he blinked rapidly, trying to focus on the road ahead. This wasn't right. It wasn't right at all. Henry sat at his usual spot by the window, but his coffee remained untouched. The weight of what he'd witnessed that morning pressed heavily on his chest. Every time Lily passed by with her cheerful smile and quick steps, his heart ached a little more. The diner had emptied out after the dinner rush. Only a few regulars remained, nursing their coffees in comfortable silence. The overhead lights cast a warm glow across the worn countertops, and the gentle clink of dishes being washed provided a steady backdrop. Henry watched as Lily wiped down a nearby table, her movements slower than usual, betraying her exhaustion. He cleared his throat. "Lily, could you spare a minute?" She looked up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Sure, Henry. Need a refill?" "No, He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I drove by the park this morning." Lily's hand, still holding the cleaning rag, froze mid-wipe. The color drained from her face, but she maintained her composure. "Oh." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I saw you there, sleeping on the swing." Henry's words were gentle, filled with concern rather than judgment. "Why didn't you tell anyone you needed help?" Lily glanced around the diner, making sure no one was within earshot. After a moment's hesitation, she slid onto the stool next to Henry. Her shoulders slumped, as if finally allowing herself to show the exhaustion she'd been hiding. "I didn't want anyone to know," she said, staring down at her hands. "I've been managing just fine." "Sleeping in a playground isn't managing just fine, Lily." Henry's voice was firm, but kind. "It's not safe, and you deserve better than that." Lily's fingers twisted the edge of her apron. "I can't afford an apartment right now. Every penny I make goes toward—" She stopped herself, biting her lip. "Toward what?" Henry prompted gently. "My sister Katie." Lily's voice cracked slightly. "She's in foster care, and I'm trying to save enough to get us a place together. But between the application fees, security deposits, and first month's rent—" She shook her head. "The playground's not so bad. At least it's peaceful at night." Henry felt his chest tighten. He thought about all the times he'd seen her serving customers with a smile, never letting on that she had nowhere to go after her shift. "Let me help you," he offered. "I have a spare room." "No." Lily's response was immediate and firm. She straightened her back, pride evident in her posture. "I don't want your pity, Henry. I've been taking care of myself since I was 16. I can handle this." "It's not pity, Lily, it's—" "Please," she cut him off, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of determination and vulnerability. "I appreciate your concern, I really do. But I need to do this on my own. I have to prove I can provide for Katie." Henry watched as she stood up, smoothing her apron with trembling hands. His heart felt heavy, seeing such a young person carrying such a burden alone. He wanted to tell her that accepting help wasn't weakness, that it took more strength to let others in than to keep struggling alone. But he could see in her eyes that she wasn't ready to hear it. As Lily walked away to attend to another customer, Henry remained at the counter, his coffee now cold. He might respect her wish not to accept direct help, but he wasn't about to sit by and do nothing. There had to be another way to help her without making her feel like she was accepting charity. Henry sat in his car, parked a block away from the playground. The digital clock on his dashboard showed 11:45 p.m. His hands gripped a soft fleece blanket and a thermos filled with chamomile tea. The night air was getting cooler, and he couldn't bear the thought of Lily sleeping in the cold. "Just leave it and go," he whispered to himself, gathering his courage. His knees creaked as he stepped out of his car, but he ignored the familiar ache. The streetlights cast long shadows across the empty playground, and Henry's footsteps were muffled by the grass. As he approached, he could make out Lily's shape on one of the swings. She had made herself as small as possible, curled up with her arms wrapped around her middle. Her work uniform was still visible under her thin jacket. The sight made Henry's chest tighten. He moved slowly, careful not to make any noise. The chains of the swing set could easily creak and wake her. Henry noticed how she had positioned herself, facing the street, where she could see anyone approaching. It reminded him of his military days, when sleeping meant always staying alert. The blanket was warm and thick, one of his favorites from home. He unfolded it with gentle movements, his weathered hands working carefully in the dim light. The night air had a bite to it, and he could see Lily shiver slightly in her sleep. "Poor child," he muttered under his breath, his heart heavy with concern. With the skill of someone used to being quiet, he draped the blanket over her sleeping form. Lily stirred slightly but didn't wake, unconsciously pulling the warmth closer around her shoulders. Henry placed the thermos on the ground next to the swing, making sure it was secure and wouldn't tip over. The tea inside was still hot. He'd made it just before leaving home. He'd added honey too, remembering how Lily always put 2 packets in her coffee at the diner. For a moment, he stood there, watching her sleep. In the soft glow of the streetlight, she looked so young and vulnerable. Nothing like the cheerful waitress who carried plates with a smile and remembered everyone's usual orders. Here, in the quiet of night, she was just a tired young woman trying to survive. His joints protested as he straightened up, but Henry ignored them. He took one last look at Lily, making sure the blanket covered her properly. Then, as quietly as he had come, he walked away. His footsteps were careful and measured until he reached his car. Once inside, Henry sat for a moment, his hands resting on the steering wheel. He thought about his warm apartment, his comfortable bed. The unfairness of it all made his throat tight with emotion. But he knew Lily wouldn't accept direct help. Not yet. Sometimes, he'd learned, the smallest acts of kindness could open the biggest doors. The night passed slowly. When morning came, Lily stirred as the first rays of sunlight touched her face. She blinked, confused by the weight of something warm around her shoulders. Her fingers touched soft fleece, and her eyes fell on the thermos beside her. Understanding dawned on her face as she picked up the thermos. It was still slightly warm. She unscrewed the cap, and the sweet smell of chamomile and honey drifted up. Lily's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time in a long while, they weren't tears of sadness. A small smile tugged at her lips as she wrapped the blanket tighter around herself. She knew exactly who had left these gifts. The simple kindness of it, the quiet way Henry had helped without making her feel ashamed, touched something deep inside her. She sat there in the early morning light, sipping the tea, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the blanket or the hot drink. For the first time in weeks, her shoulders felt a little lighter, her heart a little less heavy. Henry developed a quiet routine over the next few days. Each evening, he'd pack a few items in his old military backpack, sometimes a fresh blanket, other times a container of hot soup or a thermos of chamomile tea. He never made a big show of it, just left the items near Lily's usual spot in the playground when she wasn't there. One morning at the diner, Lily approached his table with a gentle smile. "The chicken noodle soup was really good," she said softly, refilling his coffee cup. "Thank you." Henry nodded, his weathered face creasing into a slight smile. "My wife's recipe," he replied, his voice gruff but kind. "She always said good soup could fix almost anything." After that, their conversations grew longer. During her breaks, Lily would sit at Henry's table for a few minutes, sharing bits and pieces of her day. Henry noticed how she gradually seemed more at ease around him, though she still carried that weight of worry in her eyes. One particularly chilly evening, Henry packed 2 portions of beef stew in his thermos and headed to the playground. He found Lily sitting on her usual swing, gently rocking back and forth, lost in thought. When she saw him approaching, she didn't try to hide or make excuses. Progress, Henry thought to himself. "Brought enough for 2 tonight," he said, settling onto the swing next to her. The metal chains creaked under his weight as he pulled out the containers and plastic spoons. Lily accepted the warm container gratefully. "This smells amazing," she said, taking a small bite. "You're quite the cook." "Had to learn after Sarah passed," Henry replied, stirring his stew. "Can't live on coffee and toast forever?" They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the evening air filled with the distant sounds of traffic and the occasional creak of their swings. Henry noticed how Lily savored each spoonful, eating slowly, as if to make it last. "I used to bring Katie here," Lily said suddenly, her voice soft. Before everything happened, she loved these swings." She paused, taking another bite. "Sometimes I sleep here because it makes me feel closer to her, you know?" Henry nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "In the service," he began, "we had this saying, 'You carry your home in your heart.' Took me years to really understand what that meant." "Were you scared?" Lily asked, looking at him with genuine curiosity. "During the war?" Henry set his empty container aside. "Terrified," he admitted. "Lost a lot of good friends over there. But you know what scared me more? Coming home, everything had changed, including me." He adjusted his position on the swing. "Took me a long time to learn that it's okay to need help sometimes." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing his words. "I've been taking care of myself for so long," she whispered. "Sometimes I forget what it's like to have someone care." "Well," Henry said, his voice gentle, "you've got someone who cares now." They sat there in the growing darkness, 2 souls finding comfort in each other's company. The playground, once just Lily's refuge, had become their shared space, a place where walls could come down and truths could be spoken without judgment. As they finished their meal, the understanding between them grew stronger. It wasn't just about the food or the blankets anymore. It was about the simple act of being there, of showing up when someone needed it most. The playground was quiet, except for the distant sound of traffic. Henry sat on the bench while Lily perched on the swing, her fingers wrapped tightly around the metal chains. The moon cast long shadows across the grass, and a cool breeze rustled through the trees. "I've never told anyone all of this," Lily said softly, her voice trembling. She stared down at her worn sneakers, scuffing them against the dirt beneath the swing. "It's hard to even say it out loud." Henry nodded, his weathered face etched with concern. "Take your time," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." Lily took a deep breath, and the words tumbled out like water breaking through a dam. "My father." She paused, swallowing hard. "He wasn't a good man. When he drank, which was most of the time, he'd get angry. Sometimes he'd throw things, break furniture. Other times..." She wrapped her arms around herself, as if warding off a chill. Henry's hands tightened into fists, but he remained silent, letting her continue. Mom tried to protect us at first, but then she started using drugs to cope. It only made things worse. Lily's eyes glistened with tears in the moonlight. Soon she couldn't even take care of herself, let alone me and Katie. Katie? Henry asked gently. My little sister. She's 15 now. A small smile crossed Lily's face, the first one Henry had seen all evening. She's so smart, Henry. She gets straight A's in school, even with everything that's happened. Lily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The state took her away 3 years ago when Mom overdosed. They put her in foster care, and Her voice cracked. I wasn't old enough or stable enough to take care of her then, but I promised her I'd find a way to bring her home. Henry watched as Lily's shoulders slumped under the weight of her confession. That's why I work so many hours at the diner. Every penny I make goes into savings, but it's never enough. Rent deposits, utility bills, furniture. She shook her head. Sometimes it feels impossible. And that's why you're sleeping here, Henry said softly. Lily nodded, wiping away fresh tears. I can't waste money on rent, not when Katie needs me. But without a proper home, I'll never get custody. She looked up at the stars, her voice barely a whisper. Some days I'm so afraid I'll fail her, that she'll grow up thinking I abandoned her, just like our parents did. Henry stood up slowly, his joints protesting the movement, and walked over to the swing set. He placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. You haven't failed anyone, Lily. You're fighting harder than anyone I've ever known. She looked up at him, her face streaked with tears. But what if it's not enough? What if I never manage to give her the home she deserves? Henry felt his own eyes growing moist. In all his years, through war and loss, he'd rarely encountered such raw determination and love. He squeezed her shoulder gently. You won't have to face this alone anymore, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I promise you that. Lily wiped her eyes again, looking uncertain. I don't know how anyone can help. This mess, it's too big. Let me worry about that, Henry said, though truthfully, he wasn't sure what he could do either. But seeing her there, so young, and yet carrying such a heavy burden, he knew he had to try. Henry sat at his kitchen table early the next morning, a cup of coffee growing cold beside him. His old laptop hummed softly as he scrolled through web page after web page. The morning sun filtered through his worn curtains, casting a warm glow on the scattered papers and notes spread across the table. There has to be something, he muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. He'd been up since dawn, searching for organizations that might help Lily and Katie. His notepad was filled with phone numbers and addresses of local charities, women's shelters, and social service agencies. He picked up his phone and dialed the first number on his list. A cheerful voice answered, but after explaining Lily's situation, the response was the same as the others. I'm sorry, sir, but our waiting list is several months long. Henry crossed off another name from his list. His arthritis was acting up, making his hand shake as he wrote. He thought about Lily, sleeping alone in that playground, while her sister Katie waited in foster care. The image made his chest tight. Opening his checkbook, Henry carefully reviewed his finances. His military pension wasn't much, but he'd always been good at saving. Still, as he added up the numbers, his heart sank. Even if he cut back on everything, it wouldn't be enough to make a real difference. At noon, he drove to the local housing authority office. The building was old and gray, with flickering fluorescent lights that made his eyes hurt. He waited for 2 hours in an uncomfortable plastic chair, watching people come and go with worried faces. When he finally spoke to a caseworker, the news wasn't good. The waiting list for housing assistance is over a year long, the tired-looking woman explained. And without custody of her sister, Ms. Winters wouldn't qualify for family housing. Back in his car, Henry gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He thought about his own life, the comfortable routine he'd built for himself. It seemed wrong that he had so much while Lily had so little. At the bank, he spoke with a financial advisor about his savings. "Mr. Michaels," the young man said, looking at the numbers on his screen, "you need to think about your own future. Medical expenses aren't getting any cheaper." Henry nodded politely, but inside he was thinking about Lily's smile when he'd brought her that first blanket, how she'd tried to hide her gratitude behind her usual cheerful mask. Back home, he sat in his favorite armchair, the one that had molded to his shape over the years. The evening news played quietly on the TV, but he wasn't really watching. Instead, he was looking at the family photos on his wall, faces of people long gone, reminding him of all the times others had helped him through tough spots. His savings account balance stared back at him from the bank statement on his coffee table. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough to really change Lily's situation. The frustration settled heavy in his chest, mixing with a determination he hadn't felt in years. "I won't give up," he said to the empty room. "There has to be a way." He looked again at his notes, at all the dead ends and closed doors. But something inside him, the same thing that had kept him going through the worst days of his military service, told him to keep trying. His phone sat on the side table, filled with more numbers to call tomorrow. Henry leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of the day, but also a spark of hope. He might not have all the answers yet, but he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't stop until he found a way to help. Henry sat in his usual booth at the diner, his weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. His heart thumped heavily in his chest as he watched Lily move between tables, serving breakfast to the early morning crowd. He'd been up most of the night, making calls and crunching numbers. The small apartment he'd found wasn't much, just a one-bedroom unit above the hardware store. But it was clean, safe, and most importantly, affordable with his help. When there was finally a lull in customers, Henry caught Lily's eye and waved her over. She approached his table, notepad in hand, ready to take an order. "Sit down for a minute," Henry said, his voice gentle but firm. "Please." Lily glanced around the diner, then slid into the booth across from him. "Is everything okay, Henry?" He cleared his throat, suddenly nervous. "I've been thinking about your situation," he began, his fingers drumming against his coffee cup. "And I want to help. Really help, not just blankets and thermoses." Lily's smile faltered slightly. "Henry, you don't have to." "I found an apartment," he continued, pulling out a folded newspaper clipping from his pocket. "It's small, but it's right above Miller's Hardware. The neighborhood is good, and it's only 3 blocks from here." Lily's eyes widened as she took the paper from him, her hands trembling slightly. I don't understand." "I want to help with the rent," Henry said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Just until you get back on your feet. It could be a fresh start for you and Katie." Lily stared at the newspaper clipping, her fingers tracing the edges. The price listed was more than she could afford on her waitress salary. But with help? She shook her head, trying to clear the hopeful thoughts already forming. "I can't accept that," she whispered, though her eyes remained fixed on the paper. "It's too much." "You can," Henry insisted. "And you should. Not for me, but for Katie, for yourself." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes, but she blinked them back quickly. A couple at a nearby table waved for service, and she automatically started to rise. "Think about it," Henry said, reaching across the table to pat her hand. "That's all I'm asking. Just think about it." Lily nodded, carefully folding the newspaper clipping and sliding it into her apron pocket. She stood there for a moment, caught between staying and going, between pride and necessity. "I'll think about it," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her hand unconsciously touched the pocket where she'd placed the clipping. "Thank you, Henry." As she walked away to tend to her customers, her steps were slower than usual, her mind clearly elsewhere. Henry watched her go, noting how she kept touching her apron pocket, as if making sure the paper was still there. Through the rest of her shift, Lily moved through the diner like someone in a dream. Her smile wasn't quite as bright, her movements not quite as sure. Every now and then, she would touch her pocket, and her expression would shift between hope and worry. When her shift ended, she gathered her things quickly, avoiding Henry's gaze. As she pushed open the diner's door, the bell jingling overhead, she paused for just a moment. The weight of possibility, of having a real home, of being able to provide for Katie, pulled at her heart, warring with her fierce independence and pride. The door swung shut behind her, leaving Henry alone with his cold coffee and the hope that she would make the right choice. The playground swing creaked softly as Lily rocked back and forth, her worn backpack clutched tightly against her chest. The stars above seemed to mock her indecision, twinkling with answers she couldn't quite grasp. Henry's offer of help played over and over in her mind, like a song she couldn't shake. During her shift at the diner that morning, she'd nearly dropped 3 plates, her thoughts scattered between pride and possibility. The regular customers had noticed her distraction, but they'd been kind about it, leaving extra tips that made her eyes sting with grateful tears. "I can do this on my own," Lily whispered to herself, but the words felt hollow. She pulled out her phone and looked at the last photo she had of Katie, taken during their monthly visit at the foster home. Her sister's smile was bright, but Lily could see the longing in her eyes, the unspoken question of when they'd be together again. The night air grew colder, and Lily pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. A police car drove by slowly, and she instinctively shrunk deeper into the shadows of the playground equipment. This had become her routine, hiding, surviving, but never really living. She thought about Henry's quiet persistence, how he'd left her blankets and food without expecting anything in return. His kindness had been different from the pitying looks she usually received. There was understanding in his eyes, a recognition of struggle that came from his own experiences. During her break the next day, Lily sat in the back alley of the diner, counting her tips for the 3rd time. The math never changed. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough on her own. The realization hit her like a physical blow, and she pressed her hands against her eyes, fighting back tears. "Katie deserves better," she said aloud, her voice barely a whisper. "I deserve better." That night, sleep refused to come. Lily tossed and turned on her makeshift bed of blankets, Henry's words echoing in her head. "Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is accept help when it's offered." She watched the sky slowly lighten with dawn, her decision crystallizing with the growing light. With trembling fingers, Lily pulled out her phone. It was early. Too early for most people, but she knew Henry would be awake. He always came to the diner at dawn. Her heart pounded as she dialed his number. The phone rang 3 times before his familiar gruff voice answered. "Hello? Henry?" Lily's voice quavered. She cleared her throat and tried again. "It's Lily. Everything all right?" The concern in his voice made her eyes well up. "Yes, She took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about your offer, about the apartment." There was a pause, and Lily could hear him shifting in his chair. He waited patiently for her to continue. "I want to thank you," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "For everything you've done, the blankets, the food, just being there." She wiped at her eyes with her free hand. And if your offer still stands, I think I'd like to accept your help. Her voice cracked on the last word, pride warring with necessity. But the thought of Katie gave her strength. She could hear Henry's breathing on the other end of the line, steady and reassuring. It's not easy, she added quickly, her throat tight. Accepting help, I mean. I'm still not sure about it, but... She trailed off, uncertain how to express the tornado of emotions inside her. Henry stood quietly beside Lily as the landlord unlocked the door to apartment 2B. The hinges creaked softly as the door swung open, revealing a small but well-maintained space bathed in afternoon sunlight. It's not much, the landlord said, his voice gruff but not unkind. But it's clean, got good heating, and the neighbors are decent folks. Lily stepped inside, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her worn jacket. The living room wasn't large, but the windows let in plenty of natural light. The walls were painted a soft cream color, and though the carpet showed signs of age, it was clean and well kept. Kitchen's through here, the landlord continued, leading them into a compact but functional space. Got all the basic appliances. Fridge is a bit old, but works just fine. Henry watched as Lily ran her hand along the kitchen counter, her expression a mixture of wonder and disbelief. She opened the cabinet doors one by one, peering inside as if trying to memorize every detail. 2 bedrooms down the hall, the landlord explained, gesturing toward a short corridor. Bathroom's on the right, water pressure's good, and we just replaced the water heater last month. Lily walked slowly down the hallway, peeking into each room. The first bedroom was small, but had a decent-sized closet. The second was slightly larger, with a window overlooking a small courtyard below. She stood in the doorway of this room for a long moment, and Henry could see her eyes glistening. Katie would love this room, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. She always wanted a window seat. The landlord cleared his throat. Rent's due on the 1st of each month. I know your situation. He glanced at Henry, who had already explained Lily's circumstances. I'm willing to work with you, given Mr. Michaels's recommendation. He's vouched for you, and that means something to me. Lily turned around, wiping quickly at her eyes. Thank you, she said softly. I know my application isn't ideal, but I promise I'll be a good tenant. I work hard, and I'm quiet, and... The landlord held up his hand. Miss Winters, everyone deserves a chance to make things right. Just keep paying your rent on time, take care of the place, and we won't have any problems. Henry watched as Lily walked through the apartment one more time, touching things gently, as if afraid they might disappear. In the living room, she stopped by the window, looking out at the street below. The afternoon sun caught her face, and for a moment, Henry saw something he hadn't seen in all the time he'd known her. Hope. Later that evening, Lily rushed into the diner where Henry sat at his usual spot. Her whole demeanor had changed. Her steps were lighter, her smile genuine. She slid into the seat next to him, her eyes bright with excitement. I'm taking it, she announced, her voice trembling slightly. The landlord said I can move in next week. She reached for Henry's hand, squeezing it tightly. I can't believe this is really happening. Katie, she'll finally have a real home. Henry squeezed her hand back, noticing how the usual exhaustion in her face had been replaced by a spark of joy. It was the first time since he'd known her that she looked truly happy, truly hopeful about the future. The afternoon sun filtered through the diner's windows, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Lily sat across from Henry in his usual booth, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Her earlier excitement about the apartment had faded, replaced by a heavy weight that seemed to press down on her shoulders. I should be happy, she said softly, staring into her coffee cup. I mean, I am happy about the apartment. It's more than I ever thought I'd have. But she trailed off, biting her lower lip. Henry leaned forward slightly, his weathered face creasing with concern. But what, Lily? But what if it's not enough? The words tumbled out in a rush. Katie's been in foster care for so long now. The social workers, they want proof of stability. They want to see that I can provide for her, that I can be a good guardian. Lily's voice cracked. What if, even with the apartment, they still don't think I'm good enough? Henry watched as she brushed away a tear with the back of her hand. The diner's usual afternoon chatter seemed to fade into the background as he focused on the young woman before him, seeing not just her fear, but the fierce love that drove it. Every night, Lily continued, her voice barely above a whisper, I dream about having Katie back, about making her breakfast in the morning, helping her with homework, just being there for her. But then I wake up and she's still so far away. She looked up at Henry, her eyes swimming with tears. What if the system keeps us apart forever? What if everything I'm doing isn't enough? The pain in her voice struck Henry deep in his chest. He'd seen that same look of desperation before, in the eyes of young soldiers who feared they'd never make it home to their families. Slowly, deliberately, he reached across the table and patted her hand. Listen to me, Lily, he said, his voice gentle but firm. What you're doing for your sister, it's extraordinary. Most people would have given up by now, but you've kept fighting. You slept in a playground, for heaven's sake, just so you could save money for her. Lily gave a watery laugh, and Henry continued. You're not just surviving anymore. You're building a life, a real life. That apartment isn't just 4 walls and a roof. It's proof that you're capable of creating stability, of making good choices for yourself and Katie. He paused, making sure she was really hearing him. You deserve happiness, Lily. Both of you do. And I promise you won't have to face any of this alone anymore. But what if? Lily started to protest. No what-ifs, Henry interrupted firmly. I've seen enough in my life to know that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who keep going even when they're scared. That's you, Lily. And I'm going to be right here, supporting you every step of the way. Lily's shoulders relaxed slightly, and for the first time that afternoon, a small, genuine smile crossed her face. Thank you, Henry, she whispered. I don't know what I did to deserve your kindness, but thank you. Henry smiled back, seeing in her expression something he hadn't noticed before. Not just gratitude, but a glimmer of peace, as if his words had lifted some of the weight she'd been carrying for so long. Henry sat in the sterile examination room, the doctor's words echoing in his mind like distant thunder. His fingers clutched the edge of the paper-covered exam table, knuckles white with tension. The diagnosis felt like a physical weight pressing down on his chest. Congestive heart failure. Mr. Michaels, doctor, Roberts said, his voice gentle but firm. With proper medication and lifestyle changes, we can manage the symptoms, but... He paused, adjusting his glasses. I need to be honest with you. Your condition is advanced. We're looking at months, maybe a year at best. Henry nodded mechanically, his military training kicking in. Stay calm, process the information, plan next steps. But beneath that practiced exterior, his mind raced to Lily, to all the promises he'd made, to all the things left undone. The drive home from the clinic was a blur. The autumn leaves swirled around his car, golden and red against the gray sky. Henry's hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, not from fear of death, but from the weight of what he still needed to accomplish. At a red light, he caught sight of the playground where he'd first discovered Lily sleeping. The empty swings moved gently in the breeze, and his throat tightened. She was just starting to trust again, just beginning to believe in possibilities. How could he tell her he wouldn't be around to see it through? Back home, Henry moved slowly through his modest house, touching familiar objects, the worn leather armchair where he read his morning paper, the framed photos of his military buddies, the coffee mug Lily had given him last week. It had become their routine. She'd bring him coffee every morning, her smile a little brighter each day as they planned for her future. Sinking into his armchair, Henry pulled out the doctor's prescriptions and information packets. The medications alone would eat into his savings, the same savings he'd promised to help Lily with. His pension would cover his basic needs, but not both the medical bills and assistance for Lily. "Damn it all," he muttered, running a hand over his face. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each sound a reminder of time slipping away. Through his living room window, he could see his neighbors' children playing in their yard. Their laughter carried faintly through the glass, reminding him of Katie, Lily's sister, still waiting in foster care. He thought of Lily's face when she talked about Katie, how her eyes lit up with hope and determination. Henry pushed himself up from the chair and began pacing. The doctor's words played on repeat in his mind. Months, maybe a year. Not enough time. Not nearly enough time to see Lily and Katie reunited, to watch them build the life they deserved. His retirement account statement lay on the coffee table, his safety net, the cushion he'd built over decades of careful saving. Next to it sat the rental agreement for Lily's apartment, still unsigned. Henry picked up both papers, weighing them in his hands like they were physical manifestations of his choices. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across his living room floor. Henry stood at the window, watching darkness creep across the neighborhood. His reflection stared back at him, and he noticed how tired he looked, how the years had etched themselves into his face. But in his eyes, there was still the same determination that had carried him through war zones and loss. He needed to make a decision, and he needed to make it now. Time, once such a steady companion, had become his enemy. Whatever he was going to do for Lily and Katie, it had to happen soon. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the sidewalk as Henry's old pickup truck pulled up to the modest apartment building. Lily sat in the passenger seat, clutching a small box of belongings to her chest. Her eyes were fixed on the red brick building, taking in every detail as if she couldn't quite believe it was real. "Well," Henry said, his voice gentle, "this is it." Lily nodded, unable to find words. The building wasn't fancy, just a simple 3-story walk-up with white-trimmed windows. But to her, it looked like a palace. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the truck door. Henry grabbed 2 boxes from the truck bed, his movements slower than usual. Lily noticed but didn't say anything. She followed him up the narrow staircase to the 2nd floor, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The apartment door opened with a slight creak. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the small living room. The space was modest, a compact kitchen tucked in one corner, a living area that could fit a small couch, and 2 tiny bedrooms down a short hallway. The walls were painted a soft cream color, and the wooden floors, though worn, had been freshly polished. "The furniture delivery should be here this afternoon," Henry said, setting down the boxes. "Just the basics, a bed, a couch, and some chairs to start with." Lily walked to the window and placed her hand against the glass. From here, she could see the park where she'd spent so many nights. The sight made her throat tight. "I still can't believe this is real," she whispered. They made several more trips to the truck, carrying up boxes filled with donated items from local charities, dishes, linens, and basic household supplies. Henry had thought of everything, even finding a small desk that could go in the 2nd bedroom for Katie. As they arranged things in the kitchen, Lily's hands paused over a set of ceramic mugs. "I haven't told Katie yet," she admitted. "About any of this, I'm afraid to get her hopes up until I know for sure. One step at a time. Henry said, his voice warm and reassuring. "You've got a roof over your head now. That's a pretty good start." They worked through the morning, unpacking boxes and organizing the small space. Henry showed her how to work the old radiator and which cabinet door needed an extra push to close properly. He taught her these things with the patience of a father, and Lily found herself blinking back tears more than once. By early afternoon, the apartment had started to feel like a home. Curtains hung in the windows, dishes filled the cupboards, and a small potted plant, Henry's housewarming gift, sat on the windowsill. Lily stood in the doorway, looking out at her new home. The afternoon light caught the dust motes dancing in the air, and for the first time in years she felt something close to peace. She turned to Henry, who was leaning against the wall, looking tired but content. "Henry," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done." Henry's legs felt heavy as he walked down the grocery store aisle. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright, making his head swim. He gripped his shopping cart tighter, trying to steady himself. The list Lily had given him, basic supplies for her new apartment, crinkled in his pocket. "Just need to get through today," he muttered, reaching for a box of pasta. The pain in his chest had been growing worse all morning, but he'd ignored it. He couldn't let Lily down, not when she was finally getting settled. The first wave of dizziness hit him near the checkout counter. His vision blurred, and the floor seemed to tilt beneath his feet. An elderly woman behind him noticed his unsteady stance. "Sir, are you all right?" Her voice sounded distant, as if coming through water. Henry tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The pain in his chest exploded, spreading down his left arm. His knees buckled, and the last thing he heard was the crash of his shopping cart as he collapsed. At the diner, Lily was refilling coffee cups when her phone rang. The hospital's name flashed across the screen, making her stomach drop. She answered with trembling hands, her cheerful waitress smile vanishing as she listened to the nurse's calm explanation. "Henry? Oh God, no." She barely remembered to tell her manager she had to leave before rushing out the door. The hospital waiting room was cold and sterile. Lily paced back and forth, her work uniform still on, her name tag slightly crooked. Every time the emergency room doors opened, she jumped, hoping for news about Henry. "Ms. Winters?" A doctor finally approached, his expression serious. "You're here for Mr. Michaels?" Lily nodded, unable to speak. Her throat felt too tight. "Mr. Michaels had a severe cardiac episode. We've stabilized him, but he's still unconscious. His condition is serious." Lily sank into a nearby chair, her legs no longer able to support her. Can I see him?" The doctor led her to Henry's room. The sight of him, lying so still in the hospital bed, machines beeping around him, made her chest ache. Henry, who had always seemed so strong despite his age, now looked fragile under the harsh hospital lights. She pulled a chair close to his bed and took his hand. It was cool to the touch, and she rubbed it gently, trying to warm it. "You can't do this to me, Henry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Not now. Not when I finally learned to trust someone again." The steady beep of the heart monitor was her only answer. Lily watched his chest rise and fall, each breath seeming like a struggle. Memories flooded her mind. Henry bringing her warm tea in the playground, his quiet understanding when she told him about Katie, the way he never judged her for sleeping in the park. "I need you," she admitted, tears falling onto their clasped hands. "I don't know how to do this without you. Who's going to drink terrible diner coffee every morning and leave me ridiculous tips? Who's going to tell me everything's going to be okay, even when it feels impossible?" A nurse came in to check Henry's vitals, offering Lily a sympathetic smile. "His numbers are improving," she said softly. "That's a good sign." Lily nodded, But the fear wouldn't leave her. She'd lost too many people in her life. Her mother to drugs, her father to his own demons, Katie to the foster system. The thought of losing Henry, too, made her feel like she was drowning. She squeezed his hand tighter, watching his peaceful face. "Please," she whispered, "please don't leave me alone again." The steady beep of hospital monitors filled the stark white room as Lily sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair next to Henry's bed. Her work uniform was wrinkled from sitting there for hours, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Henry's pale face, making him look older and more fragile than she'd ever seen him. She reached out and touched his hand, careful not to disturb the IV line. His skin felt cool beneath her fingers. "You have to get better," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I need you here." The events of the afternoon kept replaying in her mind. She had been arranging things in her new apartment when her phone rang. The hospital staff had found her number in Henry's phone under emergency contacts. Her heart had nearly stopped when they told her he'd collapsed. Now, watching his chest rise and fall with each breath, Lily felt the weight of everything he meant to her. He wasn't just the kind man who'd helped her off the streets. He had become the father figure she'd never had, someone who cared without expecting anything in return. A nurse came in to check Henry's vitals, offering Lily a sympathetic smile. "You should get some rest, dear. We'll call you if anything changes." Lily shook her head. "I'm staying." Her voice was firm, despite her exhaustion. He wouldn't leave me alone if our situations were reversed. As the hours crept by, Lily held vigil. She thought about all the nights Henry had brought her warm blankets and food in the park, how he'd never made her feel ashamed of her situation. The memory of his quiet kindness brought fresh tears to her eyes. "I never told you," she said softly, holding his hand. "But you saved me, not just with the apartment or the food. You showed me what it means to have someone truly care." She wiped her eyes with her free hand. "Please don't go. I still need your advice, your stories, your terrible jokes about the diner's coffee." The room grew quieter as night settled in. The hospital sounds became more distant, like waves lapping at the shore. Lily's eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but she forced herself to stay awake, watching every rise and fall of Henry's chest. A slight movement caught her attention. Henry's fingers twitched in her hand. His eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. He blinked several times, trying to focus in the dim light. "Henry?" Lily leaned forward, her heart pounding. "Can you hear me?" His eyes found hers, and recognition flickered across his face. He tried to speak, but his voice was hoarse. "Don't try to talk," Lily said, tears streaming down her face. "You scared me so much. I'm not ready to lose you, Henry. I can't lose you." Her voice broke on the last words. Henry squeezed her hand weakly. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but his words were clear. "Not going anywhere. Still got work to do." Through her tears, Lily managed a wobbly smile. Some of the tightness in her chest began to ease. She could see the familiar determination in his eyes, the same look he'd had when he'd first decided to help her. "Promise?" she asked, her voice small and vulnerable. Henry's lips curved into a slight smile. "Promise," he whispered. "Going to fight? Stick around. Make sure you're okay." The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the diner windows as Henry pushed open the heavy glass door. His steps were slower now, more careful, and his breathing came in measured beats. The hospital discharge papers crinkled in his jacket pocket, a reminder of his newfound fragility. Sarah, another waitress, rushed to help him to his usual spot. "Mr. Michaels, should you be out so soon?" He waved away her concern with a gentle smile. "Can't keep me away from my coffee, Sarah." Lily emerged from the kitchen, her face brightening at the sight of him. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron and hurried over. "Henry, I told you to rest today." Her voice carried both relief and worry. "Just needed to get out of that stuffy house," he said, easing into his familiar booth. The vinyl seat cushion felt different now, somehow both softer and harder than before. "Besides, got something important to take care of." Lily sat across from him, her brow furrowed with concern. "You're still pale. Have you been taking your medication?" Henry nodded, touched by her worry. The roles had reversed somehow. Now she was the one fussing over him. He watched as she automatically poured him a cup of coffee, then thought better of it and reached for the decaf instead. "Doctor says I need to take it easy," Henry admitted, his fingers drumming softly on the tabletop. "But there are some things that can't wait." He reached into his jacket pocket, passed the discharge papers, and pulled out a small envelope. His hands trembled slightly as he placed it on the table between them. "Henry, what's this?" Lily asked, her voice uncertain. "Open it," he said softly. Lily carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a key attached to a small wooden keychain. Her eyes widened with recognition. "That's the key to my apartment," Henry explained, his voice growing hoarse. "I want you to have it, for you and Katie." "But Henry—" Lily started to protest. He held up a weathered hand. "Listen to me, Lily. I know you've got your own place now, and that's good. But I need to know you'll have a backup plan. Somewhere safe to go, no matter what happens." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes. "Don't talk like that. You're going to be fine." "Maybe so," Henry said, managing a small smile. "But this old soldier needs to know his bases are covered. That key. It's not just about having a place to stay. It's about knowing you're not alone anymore. Never will be." Lily's fingers closed around the key, holding it tight. "I don't know what to say." "Don't need to say anything," Henry replied, reaching across the table to pat her hand. "Just promise me something. Promise you'll take care of yourself and Katie, no matter what happens to me." Lily nodded, unable to speak through her tears. The key felt warm in her palm, heavy with meaning and promise. "Now," Henry said, straightening up slightly. "How about that coffee? Decaf's fine?" The afternoon light continued to stream through the windows, casting a gentle glow over their booth. The familiar sounds of the diner, dishes clinking, quiet conversations, the soft hum of the coffee maker, created a comforting backdrop to their moment of shared understanding. The small coffee shop bustled with afternoon activity, but Lily barely noticed the noise around her. Her eyes were fixed on Katie, her 15-year-old sister, who sat across from her at a corner table. Katie's hands wrapped tightly around a hot chocolate, her knuckles white from gripping the cup. "I have something important to tell you," Lily began, her voice soft but steady. She reached across the table and placed her hand over Katie's. "Things are changing for us, Katie. Good changes." Katie looked up, her eyes cautious but hopeful. "What kind of changes?" Lily took a deep breath. "I met someone who helped me. His name is Henry, and he's become like a father to me." She paused, watching Katie's expression carefully. "He helped me get an apartment. A real home, Katie. Not just for me, but for us." Katie's eyes widened, and her grip on the cup loosened slightly. "Really? You mean we might be able to live together again?" "That's exactly what I mean." Lily smiled, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "Henry saw me when I was at my lowest point. I was sleeping in the playground trying to save enough money for us, and he—" Her voice cracked slightly. "He showed me what real kindness looks like." Katie's lower lip trembled. "You were sleeping in a playground? Why didn't you tell me?" I didn't want you to worry, Lily admitted. I wanted to be strong for you. But Henry taught me that sometimes being strong means accepting help when you need it. Katie was quiet for a moment, stirring her hot chocolate absently. I've been scared too, she finally whispered. In the foster home, I keep thinking about you, wondering if you're okay. Sometimes I feel guilty because at least I have a bed to sleep in. While you... She wiped away a tear with the back of her hand. Hey, look at me, Lily said, squeezing Katie's hand. You have nothing to feel guilty about. Everything I've done because I love you. And now, thanks to Henry, we have a real chance. Tell me about him, Katie asked, leaning forward slightly. What's he like? Lily smiled, remembering Henry's quiet strength and gentle wisdom. He's this gruff old war veteran who comes to the diner where I work. He doesn't say much, but when he does, it matters. He brought me blankets and food when I was sleeping in the park, never asking for anything in return. He sounds amazing, Katie said softly. He is, but he's sick now, Lily added, her voice catching. He has a heart condition, but he's still fighting, still trying to help us. Katie reached across the table this time, taking Lily's other hand. I want to meet him someday, to thank him. You will, Lily promised. She straightened her shoulders, feeling a new resolve settle over her. I'm going to fight for us, Katie. I'm going to do whatever it takes to bring you home. Henry showed me that I'm stronger than I thought, and I'm going to prove him right. Katie's eyes shone with tears and hope. I believe in you, Lily. I always have. Looking at her sister's face, seeing the trust and love there, Lily felt something shift inside her. She wasn't just the struggling waitress anymore, trying to survive day by day. She was someone who had been given a chance, someone who had been shown what real kindness looked like. And she was going to honor that kindness by being as strong as Henry believed she could be. We're going to be okay, Lily said firmly, holding her sister's gaze. More than okay. We're going to make it, Katie. Together. Lily's hands trembled as she held her phone, staring at the screen long after the call had ended. The social worker's words still rang in her ears. You've been approved. Katie can come live with you. Tears streamed down her face as she paced around her apartment, the same apartment that Henry had helped her secure just months ago. She grabbed her keys, nearly dropping them in her excitement. The familiar drive to the hospital felt longer than usual, each traffic light an eternity. Her heart raced with anticipation, knowing that Henry needed to be the first person to hear this news. The hospital corridors were quiet this afternoon. Lily had memorized the path to Henry's room over the past weeks. 3rd floor, turn right, past the nurse's station, 5th door on the left. She knocked softly before entering, finding Henry propped up in bed, reading a worn paperback novel. Henry! Lily burst out, unable to contain her excitement. Her voice cracked with emotion as she rushed to his bedside. I just got the most amazing call! Henry set his book down, his weathered face brightening at her enthusiasm. Despite the tubes and monitors surrounding him, he managed to sit up straighter, his eyes alert and focused on her. The foster agency called, Lily continued, dropping into the chair beside his bed. Her words tumbled out in a rush. They approved me, Henry. They're letting Katie come live with me. She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. I couldn't have done this without you. The apartment, your support. It made all the difference. Henry's eyes grew misty as he listened. Though his body had grown weaker, his smile was as strong as ever. Tell me everything, he said, his voice rough but warm. When is she coming? Next week, Lily replied, wiping away happy tears. They said the apartment is perfect, and my job is stable enough. They've been monitoring my progress and... She paused, collecting herself. They said I've shown remarkable improvement in creating a stable environment. Henry nodded slowly, pride evident in his expression. I knew you could do it, Lily. From the very first day I saw you in that playground, I knew you had the strength. You just needed someone to believe in you. But it was more than that, Lily insisted, leaning forward in her chair. You didn't just believe in me. You showed me how to believe in myself. You taught me that it's okay to accept help, that it doesn't make me weak. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small photo of Katie, taken during their last visit. Look at her, Henry. She's so excited about moving in. She keeps asking about you, you know. She wants to meet the person who helped make all this possible. Henry took the photo with slightly shaking hands, studying the young girl's face. She has your smile, he observed softly. Your determination too, I bet. She does, Lily agreed, watching as Henry carefully handed the photo back. I'm going to make sure she has everything I didn't have growing up. A stable home, someone who's always there for her. She squeezed Henry's hand again. Someone like you've been for me. Henry's eyes welled up with tears, but his smile remained steady. I'm proud of you, Lily, he said simply, his voice full of emotion. I always knew you could do it. Henry sat in his favorite booth at the diner, watching Lily serve customers with a newfound spring in her step. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow across the worn tabletops. His coffee had grown cold, but he didn't mind. These days, he treasured every moment, knowing they were precious. Lily caught his eye and smiled, that genuine smile that had replaced her old mask of cheerfulness. She finished with her customer and made her way over to his table. Ready for a refill? She asked, already reaching for the coffee pot. Actually, Henry said, his voice a bit rougher than usual. Sit with me for a minute if you can. Lily glanced around the nearly empty diner and slid into the seat across from him. The vinyl cushion squeaked beneath her weight. Katie's doing so well in her new school, she said, beaming with pride. She made honor roll last week. Henry nodded, his eyes crinkling at the corners. That's wonderful. You've given her the stability she needed to thrive. We wouldn't be here without you, Lily said softly, reaching across the table to squeeze his weathered hand. That's what I wanted to talk about, Henry said, clearing his throat. I've been thinking a lot about life lately, about the choices we make and the legacy we leave behind. Lily's smile faltered slightly. They both knew his health was declining rapidly, though neither wanted to acknowledge it directly. You don't have to, she started, but Henry held up his hand. Let me say this, he insisted gently. When I was young, in the military, I thought I knew what making a difference meant. I thought it was about grand gestures and heroic moments. He paused, taking a shallow breath. But now I know it's about the small things, the daily choices we make to help others. Tears welled up in Lily's eyes, but she blinked them back. Henry continued, his voice growing softer. You've taught me as much as I've taught you, Lily. You showed me that it's never too late to open your heart, to let people in. And you showed me that accepting help isn't weakness, Lily whispered. That sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let others care for us. Henry nodded, a tired smile crossing his face. Promise me something? Anything. Keep that strength of yours, but don't let it wall you off from others. There are good people in this world, Lily. People who want to help, just like you help others. Lily wiped at her eyes with her apron. I promise. And tell Katie. Henry's voice cracked slightly. Tell her that her sister is the strongest person I've ever known, that she should be proud of where she comes from. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the morning sun warming their faces. The coffee pot gurgled in the background, and the cook's radio played soft country music from the kitchen. I should get back to work, Lily said finally, standing up. She leaned down and kissed Henry's cheek, something she'd never done before. I'll see you tomorrow? Henry patted her hand. You'll see me when you see me, sweetheart. Just remember what I said. As Lily walked away, Henry watched her go, his heart full of peace. He'd spent years wondering if he'd ever truly made a difference in the world. Now, watching Lily move confidently through the diner, seeing the hope and determination in her eyes, he knew he had his answer. That night, in his small apartment, Henry settled into his favorite armchair. A photo of Lily and Katie sat on the side table, both girls grinning at the camera in front of their new apartment. He smiled at it, feeling more content than he had in years. As the evening light faded, he closed his eyes, ready for whatever came next. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of Lily and Katie's apartment, casting warm patches of light across their small kitchen table. Lily sat there, holding a crisp white envelope in her trembling hands. It had been 2 weeks since Henry's passing, and the pain still felt raw, like an open wound that refused to heal. What is it? Katie asked, looking up from her homework. At 15, she had Henry's same quiet way of observing things, a trait Lily had noticed during their short time together. Lily carefully opened the envelope, her heart beating faster as she unfolded the letter inside. The law firm's letterhead seemed impossibly formal for something so personal. As she read, tears began to well up in her eyes. Henry, she whispered, her voice catching. He left us some money to help us start over. Katie moved closer, wrapping an arm around her sister's shoulders. The letter explained that Henry had set aside a portion of his savings specifically for them. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to give them a real chance at stability. There's more, Lily said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She read aloud from the letter. To Lily and Katie, I want you both to know that meeting you changed my life. Sometimes the family we choose means more than the family we're born into. Take care of each other, be brave, be kind, and most importantly, believe in yourselves as much as I believe in you. Katie sniffled, and Lily pulled her closer. The kitchen felt both empty and full at the same time. Empty without Henry's presence, but full of his love and the memory of his kindness. Can we visit him? Katie asked softly. I'd like to thank him. Lily nodded, gathering her purse and car keys. The drive to the cemetery was quiet, each sister lost in their own thoughts. The morning had warmed into a beautiful spring day, the kind Henry would have appreciated. They found his grave easily, a simple headstone under a maple tree. Someone had placed fresh flowers there recently, probably one of the regulars from the diner. Lily and Katie stood there, hand in hand, looking at the carved letters that spelled out his name. I miss his smile, Katie said, squeezing her sister's hand. Even when he was sick in the hospital, he always smiled when he saw us. He was like that, Lily agreed, her voice thick with emotion. Always thinking of others, even when he was hurting. She reached out and touched the cool stone. You know, when I was sleeping in that playground, I thought I was alone in the world. But Henry, he showed me that there are still good people out there, people who care without wanting anything in return. Katie leaned her head against Lily's shoulder. He gave us more than money, didn't he? So much more, Lily whispered. He gave us hope, a chance to be a real family again. They stood there in comfortable silence, listening to the rustle of leaves above them. A gentle breeze carried the scent of spring flowers, and somewhere nearby a bird sang. It felt peaceful, like Henry was still watching over them. I promise, Lily said softly to the headstone, we'll make you proud. We'll live the life you wanted for us. She glanced at Katie, who nodded in agreement. We'll be brave, Katie added, just like you taught us. The two sisters remained there, sharing memories of the man who had changed their lives with his quiet kindness and unwavering faith in them. In the warmth of the spring sun, they could almost feel his presence, gentle and reassuring, just as it had always been. The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished granite of Henry's headstone. Lily and Katie stood side by side, their hands clasped together as they gazed at the simple inscription, "Henry Michaels, a friend to all who needed one." "I got an A on my science project," Katie announced proudly, her voice carrying across the peaceful cemetery. At 15, she had grown taller, more confident, the shadows of her difficult past fading with each passing day. "I think you would have liked it, Henry. It was about how plants grow better when you talk to them." Lily smiled, squeezing her sister's hand. Their weekly visits to Henry's grave had become a cherished ritual, a way to keep his memory alive and share their triumphs, no matter how small. The diner where she had once worked such long hours was now a distant memory. These days, she managed a small bookstore downtown, surrounded by stories and friendly faces. "The apartment feels more like home every day," Lily said softly, reaching out to brush a few fallen leaves from the headstone. "Katie's room is covered in those glow-in-the-dark stars now, and we finally got that cat we talked about. She's orange, just like you said would be good luck." The sisters had made the small apartment their own. Photos lined the walls, snapshots of their new life together, school achievements, and one precious picture of Henry from his military days that they'd found among his belongings. His kind eyes still seemed to watch over them, encouraging them forward. "Remember when you told me that someday I'd understand why you helped me?" Lily continued, her voice growing thick with emotion. "I do now, Henry. I understand." Katie wrapped an arm around her sister's waist, leaning her head against Lily's shoulder. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass and early autumn. Everything felt possible now: Katie's dreams of college, Lily's plans to maybe own her own bookstore someday, all because one man had decided to care. As they turned to leave, Lily noticed a familiar figure sitting on a nearby bench. It took her a moment to recognize Sarah, a waitress she'd worked with at the diner. The woman looked exhausted, her uniform wrinkled, her shoulders slumped with the same weight Lily had once carried. "Katie, wait here a minute," Lily said softly, moving towards the bench. Sarah looked up as Lily approached, trying to force a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lily, I hardly recognized you. You look different." "Life's better now," Lily said gently, sitting down beside her former coworker. "Are you okay? You seem tired." Sarah's smile faltered, and Lily saw the same fear and pride she'd once felt herself, the desperate need to appear strong while everything crumbled inside. "I'm fine," Sarah insisted, but her voice wavered. "Just working through some things." Lily glanced back at Henry's grave, remembering his quiet persistence, his gentle way of offering help without making her feel small. She turned back to Sarah, channeling his warmth into her own voice. "Would you like to get some coffee? Sometimes it helps to talk." Sarah hesitated, just as Lily had once hesitated in that alley behind the diner. But then she nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "I'd like that." As they stood, Lily caught Katie's understanding smile. Her sister knew exactly what was happening. They were passing on Henry's gift, extending the same lifeline that had saved them both. In that moment, Lily felt Henry's presence more strongly than ever, his legacy living on in their acts of kindness. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Lily Winters walked through the familiar park. 5 years had passed since Henry's passing, but the playground still held the same quiet magic it always had. The metal swings creaked softly, and fallen leaves danced across the ground where she had once slept. Lily sat down on the same swing where Henry had first discovered her that early morning, her hands wrapped around the cold chains, and she smiled, remembering how his kindness had changed everything. The old playground equipment had been repainted, but she could still picture exactly where she used to curl up with her thin blanket, trying to stay warm through those long nights. "I wish you could see us now, Henry," she whispered to the evening air. Katie had just started college, studying to become a social worker. She wanted to help other kids who were going through what she had experienced. The thought made Lily's heart swell with pride. The diner where she had once worked was still there, though under new management. Lily now owned a small cafe of her own just 2 blocks away. She had named it Henry's Place, and like the man himself, it had become a sanctuary for those who needed it most. Every Monday, she opened early to serve free breakfast to anyone who couldn't afford a meal. On Wednesdays, she hired teenagers from the local shelter to work part-time, teaching them the skills they needed to find stable jobs. The cafe's back room had become an informal meeting place for support groups and community outreach programs. Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn piece of paper, the letter Henry had left her. The edges were soft from years of being unfolded and reread. His words had become her guide. Kindness multiplies when we share it. Sometimes all it takes is one person believing in someone else to change everything. She watched as a young woman walked through the park, pushing a stroller. It was Maria, one of her employees who had once been homeless herself. Lily had found her sleeping in her car behind the cafe last winter. Now Maria had an apartment, was taking night classes, and had just received a promotion to assistant manager. "Hey, Lily!" Maria called out, waving as she approached. "Taking a walk down memory lane?" Lily nodded, patting the swing next to her. "Just thinking about the person who taught me that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of kindness." The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, casting long shadows across the playground. A gentle warmth filled Lily's chest as she thought about all the lives that had been touched because one quiet war veteran had decided to help a stranger sleeping in a park. She'd learned that hope wasn't just about receiving help when you needed it most. It was about passing that hope along to others. Every time she handed someone a warm meal, offered a job, or simply listened to their story, she felt Henry's spirit living on through her actions. The playground had transformed from a place of desperation into something beautiful, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, we're never truly alone. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, Lily watched the golden light play across the swing sets and slides. A peaceful smile spread across her face, knowing that Henry's legacy of kindness would continue to ripple outward, touching life after life, just as it had touched hers. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story, and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.
If you want to donate to the fundraiser, guys, we are fundraising for Beyond Blue. Beyond Blue is a mental health organization based in Australia.